Welcome everybody. This is the special interest call for PnP Sites Core and PowerShell. And this is the first call in 2017, so happy New Year still for everybody, even though it's 10 days already to the new year. We do not have a significant amount of new stuff today, but what we wanted to do quickly is to show you some numbers from the December, just to actually show you some ideas on the usage, where we are, and also to kind of show you that that people are actually using our stuff. And then we will have a discussion around the future refactoring of some of our core components, or sorry, on the provisioning engine. And Paolo Pialorsi is going to do a quick demo on that one if we can get Paolo on the call. Oh, Paolo is already presenter. It's good. Somebody was faster than me. Excellent. So a few things. So let me actually activate that one and activate my clicker so I can present more easily. Here we go. Just to quickly explain, once again, a lot of you have heard this quite a few times. SharePoint PMP is a open source initiative controlled and coordinated by engineering. So us people from Redmond, from a SharePoint Redmond engineering teams, but we work together with MVPs and with you community members to resolve issues and also to provide reusable components, samples, solutions, and all of that, so that you do not have to bang your head against the wall by yourself, and hopefully we can learn from each other by sharing our learnings around the SharePoint customizations in online and in on-premises as well. In the PMP, we do not concentrate on the farm solution side. We concentrate on the SharePoint framework, SharePoint adding model, and Microsoft Graph and Office 365 development. In on-premises, adding model, absolutely suitable approach already today. SharePoint framework will land on SharePoint 2016 during this calendar year, and we do not have a more specific timeline for that one yet. We first want to release that one in SharePoint Online, and then it's going to be landing in on-premises as well. Anyway, today is around the PnP CSAM core for on-premises and SharePoint Online and the PowerShell. And like you know, these fellows work across the different versions. They are slightly different versions actually in the SharePoint Online and in on-premises, due to the fact that the client-side object model is slightly different in the on-premises or within the online. So the server-side, let's say, service, which is responding to the CSAM object model calls, is a slightly different between the versions, and that's the reason why we have a different version of the core component and the engine for on-premises versions and SharePoint Online. Anyway, today some December statistics. Just want to share you where we are from a usage perspective and how people are using our stuff, the core component, the PowerShell, and the engine, and all of that. And then we're going to talk about, well, there's one slide around the latest on modern experiences customization story. We've been talking about that one quite a few times in this special interest group calls. So this is a one slide, just an update on that one. And then we will have a demo around the PnP provisioning engine refactoring. So this is mainly for the Schema handler, it's not handler, Schema formatters, so that we are aligning or making the future maintenance on the engine more flexible. And Paolo is going to show that one in practice during the call as well. Good. So moving along, PnP's CSAM core. So some statistics. That's what I wanted to quickly show. And I do know that these are relatively small, but I wasn't able to get them in a nice format from the Power BI, unfortunately. So this is the SharePoint Online NuGet packages downloads by month, November, December, and January. Although I say January is less than in the previous month, because we're only 11 days during January. Actually, the statistics are from 9 days, so they're not 2 days old results. But we can actually see from this one, from a SharePoint Online, that the native Microsoft SharePoint Online CSAM NuGet package downloads are growing quite fast. So there was 10,000 downloads for that one already in December. And then the PnP NuGet for SharePoint Online, we had slightly less 3,000 downloads in December for that one. which is slightly down during December for a PnP NuGet package download, so for our new solutions, but that's absolutely fine, and that's as expected because that's quite typical. And the reason for that one is that there's quite a lot of holidays in the December. So in general, we see 20% drop, 20-30% drop on the views and downloads and everything else during the holiday seasons. The reason probably for a massive increase or additional increase for native season download and the NuGet package is that we got an additional boost and additional visibility on the latest NuGet package to multiple social media channels. So that's probably the reason why it's actually more than 10,000 downloads for the December. For the on-premises, for SharePoint 2013, we do have a native season NuGet package, which it seems to be that not that many people actually know about that one, and it might be that people are actually using the MSI, so essentially the SharePoint 2013 SDK, to install the assemblies to their on-premises computers. The downside of using an MSI is that actually installs the assemblies to the global assembly GAG. And that means that any given solution what you have, it's always using the versions from the GAG. So in general, in .NET development, more and more people are recommending openly that people should be using NuGet packages when where the assemblies are no longer put in the GAG. They are actually referenced from the bin folder of the solution. And that's one of the reasons why we actually released the on-premises NuGet package for SharePoint 2013 and 2016, was it in October or November. But as we can see from here, the downloads for that one are relatively small. The downloads for SharePoint 2013 PnP NuGet packets are pretty high comparing to the native season. And SharePoint 2016, they're pretty small numbers. This could mean multiple different things, but most likely it actually means that not that many people are yet doing customizations and development on top of the SharePoint 2016, which is pretty much aligned on the overall statistics as well. So a lot of more people are in on-premises in SharePoint 2013 rather than in SharePoint 2016 due to miscellaneous reasons. And we're only slightly above 6 months from a general availability of the SharePoint 2016. So completely understandable. Some other statistics, core component, PnP core component, and PowerShell usage. The first chart on the left is showing the growth and the numbers around the HTTP requests. So the pillars are actually the HTTP requests coming through the core component and PowerShell. So as an example, on November, we had 963 million HTTP requests going through PnP Core, and 81 million going through the PnP PowerShell. In December, we went slightly down, which is once again completely understandable due to the holiday season. There was a lot of holiday additional days and public vacation days during December. From a tenant usage perspective, we hit slightly above 3,000 tenants in November, and in December it was 2,800 roughly tenants. The January numbers are looking, how would I put it, super impressive. So we keep on kind of growing from the November quite hectically as well. So December is always slightly down to the holiday season, then January is fixing the numbers once again. And right now the prediction for January is somewhere around 1.2 billion HTTP requests going through core component, and somewhere around 3,300 tenants using this stuff. On the right side, the right side picture is actually showing a requests and unit tenants by month and combined, or HTTP requests, and also the number of tenants, concentrating, well, actually on the PnP Core and the PnP PowerShell. No, actually, this is the
it's the engine usage.
This is the engine usage. Yeah, I was planning to have a separate slide on that, but then I combined the slides, so sorry for that. So this is actual tenants and requests going through and operating with the PnP PowerShell, PnP provisioning engine. So in September, as an example, we have 599 tenants, and October 778 tenants, November 952 tenants using the PnP provisioning engine. So in our core component, there's a lot of other stuff as well, but then this is specifically for the provisioning engine. In December, we were in 815 tenants using the PnP provisioning engine, which is a humongous number as well. And then the actual bigger numbers and the pillars are showing how many requests are going through PnP Core component and PnP PowerShell related on engine. And what's interesting around this chart is that we can actually see that based on this during September, November, October and November, more people were using the PnP provisioning engine using PnP PowerShell rather than using the core component, so or managed code to actually provision stuff, which absolutely is understandable. The PnP PowerShell, we have the father of PnP PowerShell in the call as well. Sorry, Irving, I always need to do that. But the original idea of that one was absolutely brilliant, and it keeps on evolving, and people are using that to provision sites. And most likely people are using that to get the configurations, for example, to SharePoint Online for migration. So whenever you're migrating from on-premises to SharePoint Online, you probably want to make sure that you have content types, lists, and libraries, and all of those settings waiting on the site before you start migrating the content. And that's where the PnP provisioning engine and with PowerShell is super, super convenient as well. But pretty cool numbers. I think I have one or two more kind of a chart just to show you the growth. This is kind of an interesting chart as well, even though completely meaningless chart, but it's kind of an interesting from that perspective that we can do a competition between the countries. So the first table is showing the order of countries based on HTTP requests coming through the PnP Core and the PnP PowerShell, and it's absolutely understandable that the United States is the biggest with that one, because they had 674 tenants using these things in December. The second is Netherlands. Netherlands are pretty high on adapting latest technologies. UK is a big one as well. Denmark, Germany, Belgium, Finland, Brazil. Brazil is kind of an interesting one if you have a look on the numbers. There's quite a small number of tenants, but there's a pretty high consumption from a HTTP request perspective. And same applies for Iceland as well. From a count of tenant perspective, United States absolutely number one, UK second, Netherlands third, understandable. Germany is a big one as well, so that's understandable. Sweden, Denmark, Australia, Norway, Finland. I think Norway actually passed Finland this month, first time in the competition in quotes, and then French. And what's interesting, if you have a look on the world map from a, let's say, adaption perspective, there's some countries where people are mainly using only PowerShell. And then there's some countries where people mainly use the managed code version of the code or services what we're providing. But the red one essentially is the PowerShell, and the green one in the chart is then the core managed code. And what's kind of it's complete, this is a stupid joke, but what bothers me with all of these maps always is that now on the map you can see North America and South America, and you can see those charts over there, but what is that North Amer on the right side? So what's that area, and why isn't anybody using? No, never mind, patch up. I know I wouldn't be suitable for stand-up comedy. And this is the final chart before we go to the other topics, just to because we know that people are submitting, we're asking people to submit pull requests and their contributions, and we're asking people to report if they have any issues, and we're obviously trying to follow up on the issues. And even though you might not see any communications on the issues, we are actually looking in many of them as well. And these are two charts which on the left side you're seeing how many open issues were opened during particular week and how many items were actually closed. And this is the PMP repos plus the SharePoint framework and modern SharePoint development repositories as well. So it's not just the PnP repo and not just the PnP Core or PnP PowerShell, but still. And then on the right, but like as we can see, for example, for the closed and opened issues, during the first week of January, we had 124 124 closed items, and then slightly above open issues. Anyway, and then on the right side we can see how many pull requests are being closed and how many pull requests are being opened as well. So these are actual contributions from the community towards the PMP or the SharePoint framework samples as well. So we're tracking these in a relatively detailed level, and the reason why we're doing that obviously is that we want to make sure that we understand in the SharePoint engineering as well how much we need to invest on the PnP and how much we need to make sure that that the issues and the pull requests are being tackled and handled and all of that. Good. And yes, Nigel is absolutely correct on that. There was a lot of stuff being worked on by Irving Impala actually last week. So that's the reason why there's a massive leap over there. Good. Now, moving on away from the statistics, and by the way, there will be time for Q&A today, so if you have any random questions and issues, let's open up the audios as well. And just a quick update on the modern experiences. So we want to make sure that people are aware of this, and then I don't even have the URL for this in the slide, which is awesome. Let me actually write that one there. So if you go SPBMB MSDN, that will actually land you the MSDN location where we have the latest on SharePoint adding model development and site provisioning and remote provisioning and all of that. And in there, in the left navigation, you'll find the introduction to modern site customization, if I remember correctly. And there we actually have 5 articles, and these 5 articles are explaining the current customization status of the modern experiences. So what kind of customizations you can do in the modern sites, and how do you provision them, what kind of customizations you can do in modern lists and libraries, and what kind of customizations you can do on modern pages. So what is the branding story and all of that? Right now, those customization, supported customization scenarios are quite limited. We in the SharePoint engineering, we're working on enabling additional scenarios. Unfortunately, we cannot give you an exact date, because the problem is that if we give you a date, then we need to commit on that date, and if we slip from that date, that might cause a problem if you have assigned your deliverables based on the date. Because in our internal planning, we do not exactly know in the week-by-week precision when these things will be tackled. But as an example, we've already updated the customization support for modern lists and libraries. You were unable to target a custom list action to a specific content type, and that's now supported again in the modern list as well, like it was in the classic list a while back. But the key point of this message and the key point of this guidance, which is called out quite in every single of these articles, we are not deprecating the classic experience. Please have a look on the modern experience, and if it's not fulfilling your scenario, do not switch yet on using the modern experiences. You use and switch to use the modern experiences whenever the modern experiences are fulfilling your business and functional requirements. And we will keep on enabling new scenarios. Right now, good example, the release, the SharePoint framework is now on the release candidate. The following things what we're working on, which we actually told already in Ignite back in Atlanta in September. We're going to talk about work on the JS link story. We're going to work on the tenant level customizations and JavaScript embedding and all of those things. So those things will be gradually enabled on the modern sites as well in a slightly different way. And the modern branding scenarios will be enabled there as well. And we keep on telling, and there will be announcements, visible announcements on all of these whenever we get stuff out. So we'll get there. We just need to be patient. And I personally, as an ex-field person, absolutely understand the frustration, because it would be so nice that we would already support all of this stuff. So good. I think it's actually time to move into the demo section. So I'll let actually Paolo to take over. Paolo has already been upgraded as a speaker, and what we wanted to do is show you some level of a refactoring what we're doing in the PnP provisioning engine, and run through with you with some ideas and maybe get some feedback on our thinking as well. But I'll let Paolo share the screen and we'll start from there.
Okay, thank you, Reza. I'm going to share my screen, so let me know when you see it. Starting, you're about, okay. Loading. Of course, can you hear my voice? I think so, but
yep,
just to be sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Unless you are just voices on my head, so who knows?
Exactly. Okay, so now can you see my screen or not yet?
All good. Okay, we got the screen.
Okay, so the purpose of this demo is just to share with you what we want to do or what we plan to do from a template formatting perspective in order to share with you the goal, have feedbacks, if any, and try to target the right goal and the right architecture for everybody. So probably you know that whenever we handle a template, a provisioning template, we have inside the provisioning engine a template formatter model, which allows us to do the translation from the XML or from the JSON or from whatever else format we have into the domain model that we have in memory, which represents the provisioning template, and we do the formatting of those provisioning template back and forward from the persistence layer using a bunch of different formatters that we have right now. For example, from an XML perspective, based on the schemas that we support so far in the engine, we have a bunch of formatters, one for the schema of 2015-03, one for the May 2015, and so on and so forth. And the latest one is the 2016-05. Right now, we are already working on a new version of the schema, and whenever we release a new version of the schema, we need to create also a new formatter for that specific version, which of course is totally doable, but it requires quite a lot of effort because every single formatter right now has to translate or to migrate properties and information from an object model, which is an in-memory representation of the XML document that we have on the persistent storage, and we have to translate that object model from the XML representation into the domain model that we have in the provisioning engine. And so right now every single formatter has to implement the iTemplate formatter interface, and within the implementation of the formatter we have a method to convert a provisioning template domain model object into a stream of bytes, which can be an XML file or a JSON file or whatever else, and we will have to go through all of the properties of the domain model object that we have in memory in order to configure and to create the XML that we want to save in the persistent storage. And the same story whenever we want to load a template from an XML file or from a stream from the persistent storage. So we get a stream and we have to go through all of the information we have inside the XML stream, and we have to convert let me scroll down a little bit more. We have to convert all of the properties that we have in the XML file into the domain model object. So now we are trying to make it easier for the provisioning engine and from an architectural perspective to do the conversion between the persistent format and the domain model object that we have in memory. The idea we have right now is to use the AutoMapper library. I don't know if you are aware of it or not, but it is a library, an open source library with the same license that we have, the MIT one. It is on GitHub as well as PMP, and it is quite a good project that most of the developers out there are already using their own solutions. So our plan is to leverage the same library in the PMP provisioning engine to automate the mapping between the properties of the object that we have and that come from the XML representation of the templates into the properties and into the object that we have in the domain model of the PMP provisioning engine. In order to do that, we are working on a technique that will leverage a bunch of mapping profiles that are a capability of the AutoMapper engine, so that we will be able to define just a set of profiles which will define how an object and more in general, the entire object model of the provisioning engine can be translated from one version of the schema into the domain model object that we have and we want to handle. So just to share with you the overall idea, I created a small proof of concept that I share with my colleagues in the core team as well. And here I'm just using the AutoMapper library, which I can get using NuGet, and here I just create a configuration for the AutoMapper, and my configuration is based on a profile object, which is this guy, in which I simply declare this is a small proof of concept, so I don't have the entire object model that we have right now in the provisioning engine, but I just define some of the objects that we have, like the provisioning template, of course, like the composed look object, or the collection of localizations that we have in a provisioning template. And here I can, in this profile file, where the profile type is a type provided by the AutoMapper library, I can define all the mappings between all of the types that I have. So for example, I can define a mapping between the provisioning template that we have in the domain model and the provisioning template that we have in the schema version 2016-05. And I can do the same for the composed look, for the localization objects, and for many other objects that we could have in the domain model. Of course, some of the objects that we have cannot be handled by the AutoMapper completely automatically, and so we are also trying to figure out how many and how complex are the custom converters that we need to implement to do the mapping between the XML schema and the domain model objects, still using the AutoMapper approach. And so in this profile file, I just defined a bunch or just a few mappings between what I have in the domain model and what I want to have in the schema. As you can see, using some of the capabilities of the AutoMapper library, I can also declare that I want to do the mapping from the provisioning template to the one in the schema and the reverse map, so that I will be also ready to translate, to map whatever I have in the provisioning template of the schema back to the domain model. Once I've done that, I can simply create a new mapper object based on that configuration, so based on that profile, and I can create, this is just a fake one, a fake provisioning template object that I can translate into the XML representation of the domain model object, and back again from the XML representation into the domain model, so that I can, using this proof of concept, I can play with a full round trip back and forward, moving back and forward all of my domain model objects. Of course, this way of working will make way more easier to do the mapping and the translation in the formatter of all of the objects that we have in PnP. So I can run this sample just to show you the result, even if it doesn't really matter to see that it works. Of course, it will work. But here I have a breakpoint, and I can show you that if in the source object I have my provisioning template with a sample ID, a sample site policy, a few localization items, and a compose look, as well as some custom properties, when I do the translation using the mapper, I will get back as a result an object which will be the one of the XML schema with exactly the same information but translated into the new layout, which will be useful to be stored, to be saved as an XML file on the persistent storage system. And of course, I can go back to the original object, so source again, I can have back all of my information back in the domain model architecture. So, how do we want to use this approach within the formatters of the PnP provisioning engine? Let me go back to the PnP Core library source code, and let me close this guy. Here I have a custom XML PMP schema version X, Y, and Z. This is the one for 2016-05 automapper formatter. I'm inheriting from a base class, which will be this guy, in which I defined all of the basic information that every single formatter will have or will need. And especially, this is still under construction, so it's not 100% ready. But here, for example, when I do the conversion to a formatted template, so I get as an input the domain model provisioning template, and I want to return a stream, which will be, for example, my XML file, I will simply create a mapper object, and I will do the mapping between the template that I have and the result object that I want to use. Here, of course, I will have to replace in this base abstract class some of the type declaration with a generic version of them, but the overall goal will be to have a formatter like this one, which can be the one for any of the specific version we have, in which we will simply have to configure the mapping settings in order to do the proper mapping back and forward from the XML to the domain model and back again. And we will use, that's the plan at least, we will use some profile files. So, for example, here I have a profile file that I have already defined in my branch, in which I declared all of the rules to do the mapping between all of the objects that we have in the domain model and in the XML schema representation of our information. So, based on this information, we would like, first of all, to share with you the goal, the final goal, and to see if you have any feedback, if you agree, if you don't agree, if you have any suggestion about how to try to achieve this goal, which will be to make much more easier and to simplify the overall inner working of the formatter engine, to make it easier for us to release new version of the schema without having to write a bunch of code every single time. And from your perspective, to have a more automatic migration from one version to another of the schemas.
Paolo, just to kind of reiterate what we were showing, can you go to any of the existing schema formatters and just show the list of code what we have on the individual formatter? Sure. Because I think that's essentially what we've been forced to do in the past, is that whenever we release a new provisioning schema, we essentially replicate this amount of code for that particular schema, and then we do mapping, and then we do conversions between the versions. We double check that if it's a certain version, then we do mapping in here, and that's a really error-prone approach, and it's a massive job to actually make it happen. And that's why we haven't been able to really release new schema versions super fast. We understand that there are asks and people are submitting things, but making that happen in a reliable way in the engine has been really a challenge. So in the new approach, what we're looking to do is all of these individual pieces, what Paolo is expanding, and
it will take a while.
This is just the code to handle one schema formatter.
Version.
This isn't
one version, exactly.
Yes, this isn't provisioning a thing. This isn't reading anything. This is just for mapping the objects between the schema itself. So in the future,
just in one direction. Sorry,
yes,
this is in just one direction.
Exactly.
So from the domain model to the XML, and then there will be almost the same quantity of code to do the backward route. So
to another side, yes, indeed. Yeah. So in the future, there will be only essentially one formatter for a specific type, and then inside of that formatter, we have the logic. So we're able to kind of split the code in the smaller maintainable pieces, and we avoid this duplication of code. And I know that this is super hardcore stuff on the implementation of the core, but I do know that there's some people who've contributed on the core and are following up on what we're doing quite closely. So we wanted to go through this one. Nigel is saying absolutely makes sense in the IAM window, and it might be that we lost majority of the audience when we were going through this, but because this is pretty deep on the implementation. How many lines of code, just out of curiosity, we have just within a one formatter? We don't have actually. That's a good point. This just to show off.
2,500.
Okay, 2,500. Do we actually have any analytics on the whole solution? Just out of curiosity, I don't think we have.
I don't have, at least not right now. But
yeah.
No, we don't have.
There is something magic that I can press in Visual Studio to do that, but I'm unaware of that.
It's in an analyze window, and
it will take a while.
Calculate code metrics. But
yes,
it will take a while to run.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens in the meantime.
Yes. Because it is pretty interesting. So people are quite often, we get the feedback that, hey, I want to have this and that, I want to have that, and the new capability and everything else. Now, the challenge obviously is that the PMP engine is used by more than 3,000 tenants, and it's widely used in production by thousands of people. So we need to be super careful on making changes, and these kind of refactorings are targeting to make those changes to be more easily doable.
And by the way, if we have 24,000 lines of code in the entire core library, and we have 3, 4, 5 formatters, 10,000 lines come from the formatters. So
yes,
changing the approach will get us rid of this huge complexity.
True. 25,000 isn't actually too bad. I was expecting slightly more than that, but still.
Me too. But
good.
We're efficient.
Indeed. Yes, Roddy, we are. That's a good point.
Except for the formatters right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Good. Don't see any other comments on the IAM window or anything like that. I think we might have lost majority of the audience in the call, which is completely understandable with this discussion, but at least you will know what I'm working as part of the February release. That's still the target. And one thing maybe to actually mention related on the February release, we're looking into also getting the assembly references slightly more clarified on the core component. Right now we're referencing certain assemblies which technically requires you to install Office extensions to the machines and all of that. So we're trying to get all of that more clarified as part of the February release. Why is it such a hard word to say? February release. Damn. Anyway,
maybe
try to
one more.
say it in Finglish.
Yes.
Yeah, it's in Finnish, of course.
Finnish. Can you say it in Finnish and let me try to say it in Finnish?
It's helmikuun julkaisu. But anyway.
I can't even remember that.
That's February release. So Okay, cool. I think we can flip back on the slides and
yes, just one last thing, Viz, if I can, just to remind to the community. Our plan is to do this refactoring of the formatters, and just after the refactoring, we will go to release a new version of the schema, and we want to wait for the refactoring before releasing the schema, just to avoid writing one more huge formatter before having done the complete refactoring. So if you can expect the new formatter architecture for the February release, the new schema most likely will come the month later.
Yeah.
So just to share the plan. Of course, it's not there's no guarantee, but that's the plan at least.
It's the schema and the new support within the engine for the schema as well, hopefully in the March release. So there's some additional things in the queue related on schema. The current schema and the current model, the provisioning model is already covering like 90-95% of the scenarios, which we can do using the client-side object model. But there are certain specific requests which are now queued up in the provisioning schema repo, which will be then addressed with the latest schema. Good. There's the false statistics. Let's not actually start analyzing our code, but it's interesting to have the number of lines. Good. I'll switch back on the slides. So we can actually have a open discussion then on random other topics as well. So on top of this one, like mentioned, yesterday we did have the monthly community call. We went through what has happened in the past month and everything else. And this is pretty close, and it happens every now and then that the special interest group calls are pretty close. So we didn't actually have anything other than this scheduled for this particular special interest group call. Theoretically, we could have been able to show some of the new PowerShell commandlets, which were related on the recycle bin handling in the PnP PowerShell, but we wanted to make sure that we show the engine refactoring rather than that for now. Maybe just to mention on the PnP PowerShell side, if you missed it yesterday, right now we have 199 commandlets in the PnP PowerShell, which is super impressive. So we're hitting the 200 commandlets for different operations against SharePoint Online or SharePoint On-premises remotely, most likely within the next release. So that's pretty cool. Well, obviously depends on the ideas of people implementing certain commandlets and the requirements what they have. But that's it for now. Oh, there are still new ones in the pipeline. Thank you, Irving. So we're going to hit the 200 commandlets this month. If you have any questions, if you have any open kind of hey, this is bothering me, I'm hitting this kind of an issue, those are fine to tackle on the Q&A side. We really want to make sure in the special interest group calls we have time for Q&A as well. If you prefer, you can use the IM window. If you want to give us feedback around, hey, your modern experiences do not support X and Y and Z, trust me, we know. We can address that, but feel free to rant in the IM window as well if that helps. Anything else? Who or what uses Authentication Manager in the core? And so Authentication Manager can be used, for example, in the Azure Web Jobs or remote connectivity. Quite often, actually, it is used in connectivity of things, and I think Ruddy is more thinking, okay, do we need to how do we refactor that in the core now that we're planning to do certain changes in the authentication side?
Yeah, it's actually used inside core and inside test automation quite hectically. It's also used in several other projects already, so people are using it as a class to make it easy for them to authenticate against SharePoint using different means. It's used by PowerShell, so it's pretty deeply embedded actually.
Yep, and it also has stuff for ADFS that...
yes, which is legacy old stuff, which could be better implemented, I think. So there is definitely some room for improvement over there.
Yeah, but we need to backwards compatible keep it there, right?
Yep. Yeah. I, for example, have customers that use the ADFS implementation because for the on-premises SharePoint environments.
Okay. Right. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of identity model classes in Core as well. I'm also checking those out. Do you have more information about who uses them and what uses them?
I think some of them are used for the ADFS support. Essentially, they're also copies of the Microsoft code inside Core. So
yeah.
maybe not the best solution, but at that point, I think there was, I don't know why we decided to do like that, but it ended up in Core. So if there's better models, yeah, sure.
Yeah, you can see that there's comments that it's been taken.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just sussing out those classes and trying to understand where they're used and what they're used for, and that's it.
On the testing side, do you want to share anything on that, Bert?
Well, on testing side, we keep on expanding, adding more tests. I think from an engine perspective, we now have, I would say, like a 95% coverage of the engine functionality that's being tested. We're still not testing all the combinations of apply and create parameters that you can pass along in the engine. So there are some particular combinations which are not tested, but I think we're in good shape over there. The next thing around testing, Nigel, is testing against the no script sites or the modern team sites, which have no script enabled. So I'm actually building that right now. So that will be in also this month. So we'll have I will test, each and every test case will run against a no script site, a modern team site, to ensure that the engine works for those sites as well. So that's kind of the bigger things coming up around testing. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? We have an issue with modern experience with the new quick launch where it will randomly add pages resetting itself. Sometimes these pages don't exist anymore, so it will list page not found. The top navigation also doesn't use the normal navigation options from site settings. So a user was entering on this top one, but feels like it might be linked. Yeah. So on the and these are most likely on.
It sounds like a bug.
Yeah, it sounds like a bug, no doubt. And on the or it might be actually on the site and in the list level as well. But yes, it's no doubt a bug, and I'm pretty sure that we're actually fixing those things relatively fast. The challenge is really around covering different options. So the navigation options, as an example, can be super complex. The certain navigation options can be super complex to implement in the modern experiences. So at some point, certain persons have decided to implement only some of them and go live with the minimal viable product version, even though some of the settings are not yet supported. I think as an example, on the list and libraries level, we don't support the managed navigation-driven navigation. But all of that is in the roadmap, but we don't have exact timeline when it will be then added on the modern experiences. And that's really the reason why we are clearly calling out in the documentation as well. So have a look on what's critical for you. If it's not yet working properly and having this kind of a random things, don't switch to modern. It's not then suitable for you. Keep on doing custom.
Let's spell them out. Yeah, but let us know that this is an issue, meaning we need to, if it's a bug, we can kind of repro it, we can fix it.
Sure.
Often to raise it.
Hey Vesa, I have a question to the people here. And it's related to the navigation element in the provisioning template. When you're using that, some might have noticed that we add nodes to the existing navigation. So you end up with duplicate nodes. Now there is a property that you can set actually to remove the existing nodes before we add items to it, to basically clear out. And I would like to know how people think if we turn that functionality around. So if we by default clear all the nodes in the navigation in the quick launch before we add items, and if you don't want that you then specify to not clear it out.
Because right now we do the opposite. So right now that property is false, and so if you don't turn it on, the node will be added.
Yeah.
And not replaced.
So I just wonder what people think of that. It is effectively a breaking change if you think about it, because the default behavior changes. But I think it's actually more expected behavior. If you specify nodes in your template, that will be the navigation you want, and not on top of the existing ones. And if you want to add to an existing one, you just set that property to false.
Mm-hmm. Just to give an answer to Ivan, so far that's the policy we have. We do not delete anything by default, and more in general, we try to not delete anything, just to be sure that we do not compromise anything in your environment. But in this specific scenario, if you extract the template from a site and you apply the template to another site, and then you do it again, and again, every single time the nodes in the structural navigation will be added.
Correct.
As long as you don't specify that you want to clean and replace all the navigation nodes. And we cannot make any delta changes because we just have the title of the node, so it's not doable.
Can we do an alternative? Could be, but I know there is some drawbacks there as well, is adding an additional apply parameter. But we already have quite a lot of apply parameters, so you can control the default behavior. If a customer by default wants to clean and then add, okay, then we set the parameter, and then regardless of the template, we do clean and add.
That behavior is right now embedded in the template itself. But
move it to an apply parameter, so you can choose when you use the engine or when you use PowerShell whether you want to, which behavior you want actually.
Yeah.
In PowerShell at least, but from an object model perspective, you still have to do it manually somehow.
No, it's the same with apply. You can use the object.
Or we can
go like that.
Property.
We can customer can choose.
Yeah.
But I think we should maybe stick with our do not delete by default policy, like we've done in the past. Because if someone doesn't know it and by default things get dropped, it might hurt the customer.
Yep.
Yeah.
So deleting is
enough. I mean,
it's
so
the default.
So we keep it as it is. Okay.
Well, no, introduce an additional property on the creation information object.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do that. I think we need to document those properties better. I think there's definitely a gap for us to get a better documentation around the different engine properties and settings that there are, because we keep on growing those, and we actually don't really document them very well. But yeah, that's the way to go, I think.
Okay. That was it for me.
And I'm just adding the YouTube video channel link there as well. So Stephen was asking, can we get a copy of the audio? So audio, we only publish our stuff right now to YouTube, and that's all of the monthly recordings, sticks, webcast, and everything else is in the YouTube. So all of these sessions are being recorded, and within 24 hours, everything will be in YouTube. Now, we do understand that if you would like to download stuff from YouTube, that's not natively supported in YouTube channel. There are free tooling in the internet how to do that, but we simply don't have time or resources to publish our stuff in the multiple different channels, unfortunately. And channel 9 wasn't an option for us due to numerous reasons. So, we used to be in channel 9, and then we realized that channel 9 has a lot of limitations and bigger limitations than in YouTube. So, other things, we're in 4 minutes of closing the call, so we're closing pretty fast in. We do not have to sit on the call for the whole hour. Maybe one thing just to kind of a pinpoint, we used to have a highly active Yammer channel, Yammer discussion group. in the Office 365 technical web networks. And if you do have questions, we are trying to follow up on them in the Microsoft Technical Network. It's not as active as it used to be in Yammer at this point, because quite a lot of people who used to be in Yammer have not transformed yet to the Microsoft Technical Network. But if you have any questions, please use that. There's a lot of engineering people who are watching those discussions as well. Good. So last month we discussed some new provisioning options using PowerShell in on-prem. So quickly answering on Steven's question, that's the AKMS SPBMB community, which is in the Iron window. On Russell's comment, I don't think we actually have anything super new for on-premises as such. But obviously all of the stuff what we have in the PMP works with SharePoint 2013 or SharePoint 2016. There are certain limitations though, to the limitations of the remote APIs in older versions of SharePoint. One of your people were working on it for another customer.
I think he's referring to what I lost the name. It's the partner pack, and then the on-prem version, the partner pack. Yeah.
Ooh, that one. So the on-premises partner pack. The partner pack is a starter kit for customers around the self-service site provisioning, and it's right now targeted for SharePoint Online. We're getting more and more asks around the on-premises version of that particular thing. I can't remember who was it. I need to go back on the recordings on getting that stuff, maybe the working on premises or a version or adaptation on doing that. We right now are not planning to invest on that one in a really short time frame, but the more and more pressure and more questions we're getting, the more high priority thing that will be. And it seems to be popping up all the time. So during Ignite, there was a lot of people asking that stuff for on-premises as well, because there's still a humongous amount of people in on-premises. But we'll need to follow up on that one. But no, nothing new on that one for the time being, unfortunately. But we're hitting the hour. Let's actually close up the call and continue. So within 2 weeks, we have the special interest group for PnP and PowerShell. So this one is a bi-weekly call. And next time we should have more to show maybe more capabilities and more new stuff on the other stuff as well. Within next week, there's the special interest group call for SharePoint Framework and the JavaScript development. That's on Thursday next week. You can find all of the URLs in the SharePoint PMP site or a page in the dev.office.com. But thank you everybody for joining. The recording will be in YouTube within 24 hours. So thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.